Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping straight into uh, the really revolutionary ideas of Eric Ries.
Yeah, his book, The Lean Startup, how today's entrepreneurs use continuous innovation and so on.
Exactly. We're using excerpts from the book itself, so that's our source material for today.
And our mission, well, it's pretty focused. We want to pull out the core, the DNA of this lean startup method,
Right.
figure out how it gives us a fresh way to think about building businesses, especially when things are really, really uncertain.
Which they often are when you start something new.
Totally. And this isn't just for, like, tech startups in a garage. These ideas, they're useful everywhere. Big companies, small companies, maybe even government work.
Yeah, that's a key point. Because it is kind of striking, isn't it? You see so many products. People pour their hearts into them, detailed plans,
Mm.
and then poof, they fail.
Right. Rees talks about feeling that himself, working super hard on stuff that, well, the market just didn't want. Yeah, and that pain, that experience, it's what led to the lean startup. It's a way to kind of engineer success, not through perfect planning, but through learning, adapting constantly.
Okay, so where does it start? What's the foundation?
It really begins with how Rees defines a startup. It's quite specific.
Okay.
He calls it a human institution designed to create a new product or service. Okay, standard enough so far. Under conditions of extreme uncertainty.
Huh. Extreme uncertainty. That's the key phrase.
Absolutely. And it makes the definition really broad.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not just, two people in a dorm room.
Not at all. Size doesn't matter. Industry doesn't matter. Sector doesn't matter. He says entrepreneurs are, well, everywhere.
Even in big places like Intuit or government agencies.
Exactly. So the takeaway for you listening is, if you're trying something new and the outcome isn't guaranteed,
Mhm.
well, you're basically an entrepreneur in this view.
And the lean startup gives you a map for that uncertainty based on, what, 5 principles?
5 key principles. Yeah. First one, and we kind of touched on it, but it's worth saying again, entrepreneurs are everywhere. It applies broadly.
Okay. Okay.
Second, entrepreneurship is management. This is interesting. Because you're dealing with chaos, you need a different kind of management, one built for uncertainty.
Mm.
Grix even suggests, maybe only half-jokingly, that entrepreneur should be an actual job title in big companies that need to innovate.
Huh. Imagine that on a business card. Entrepreneur Innovation Division.
Right. Okay, third principle, validated learning. This is huge. The main goal isn't just shipping a product, it's learning. Learning how to build a sustainable business.
And validated means you can prove it scientifically.
Kind of, yeah. Through
Okay.
experiments. Frequent experiments that give you real data, not just gut feelings.
Which leads nicely into number 4, I bet.
You got it.
Yep.
Build, measure, learn.
Yeah.
This is the engine. The core loop. Turn ideas into something tangible could be super basic.
An MVP, maybe? We'll
Yeah.
get to that.
Exactly. Then you measure how real customers react. Not what they say, what they do. And then, crucially, you learn from that.
Yeah.
Either you keep going or change direction.
Yeah.
You do it fast.
Okay. Build, measure, learn. Got it. And the 5th?
The 5th principle ties it all together. Pivot or persevere. Based on that validated learning from the loop, you face a big choice.
Stick or twist.
Pretty much. Do you make a fundamental change in strategy that's a pivot? Or do you double down on the current path, persevere? And it has to be driven by the evidence you gathered.
This feels, completely different from how a lot of traditional businesses operate, doesn't it?
Oh, massively different. Think about a classic business plan. It's like launching a rocket ship.
Right. Everything calculated down to the millimeter beforehand.
Exactly. Super detailed, assumes you know everything up front, and if you deviate even slightly, disaster. You miss Mars entirely.
Yeah, no U-turns in space.
Whereas the lean startup is more like driving a car. You know where you want to go, roughly.
But you're constantly checking the GPS, looking at traffic, maybe taking detours.
Precisely. Course correction is built in. Rees tells this story, a cautionary tale, really, about a company that forecasted massive success, poured tons of money into building capacity based on that forecast, and then rigidly executed the plan perfectly.
Okay, so what went wrong?
The plan was perfect, but the core assumption that people actually wanted the product was dead wrong. They achieved failure, as he puts it, executed a flawed vision flawlessly.
Woof, that hurts just hearing it. So if lean startups aren't just following this rigid plan, how do they measure if they're actually getting anywhere? What's the progress metric?
Yeah, this is a really fundamental shift. Instead of just counting features shipped or milestones hit, the lean startup uses validated learning as its main unit of progress.
Validated learning. Okay.
It's about proving, with real evidence, that your core ideas about the business are actually true. Are you learning if people value what you're building? Are you learning how to reach them?
So the progress is in reducing uncertainty and not just building stuff.
Exactly. It's about figuring out what you don't know
Yeah.
and then designing experiments, building things specifically to find those answers.
I can imagine that might feel a bit weird at first. Like you spend a week building something small and the result is, okay, we learned X, not we shipped feature Y.
Totally. It can feel less tangible. Code is real. You can see it. A new feature is demonstrable.
Right.
But that learning, that reduction of risk and uncertainty, that's arguably much more valuable early on than just, more lines of code based on a guess.
Okay, I'm starting to see it. So let's get practical. That build, measure, learn loop. How does it actually work day to day?
Well, Rees flips the usual planning process on its head.
Yeah.
You actually plan it backward.
Backwards. How so?
First, you figure out, what do we absolutely need to learn right now? What's the riskiest assumption we're making?
Okay, start with the learning goal.
Yep. Then you ask, okay, to learn that, what specific thing do we need to measure? What metric will tell us if our assumption is right or wrong?
So learning goal first, then the metric.
Right. And only then do you figure out what's the absolute minimum thing we need to build to run the experiment that gets us that measurement.
I see. Build comes last in the planning.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like setting up a science experiment for your business idea. You're not just tracking revenue, you're tracking how well your experiments are proving or disproving your core beliefs.
Beliefs about what specifically?
He talks about leap of faith assumptions.
Yeah.
These are the big, scary unknowns your whole business hinges on.
Okay, like what?
Two main types. The value hypothesis. Does this thing actually deliver real value to customers? Will they use it or, better yet, pay for it?
Right, do people care?
And the growth hypothesis. How will new customers discover this thing? How will we grow? Will it be word of mouth? Advertising? Something else?
Value and growth. Got it. And the build, measure, learn loop is how you test these.
Precisely. As quickly and cheaply as possible.
Yeah.
And the main tool for doing that is the minimum viable product, the MVP.
Right, MVP. We hear that acronym all the time. What does it really mean in this lean startup context? Is it just a buggy first version?
Not necessarily buggy, no. It's the fastest way to get through one full cycle of the build, measure, learn loop with the minimum amount of effort possible.
Minimum effort.
The key isn't making it tiny. It's making it fast to build so you can start the learning process ASAP. It's all about accelerating that loop.
Okay, faster learning, not just smaller product. Can you give us some solid examples, like real companies?
Absolutely. Zappos is a classic. Nick Swinburne had this hypothesis, this leap of faith. People would buy shoes online. Big assumption back then.
Yeah, hard to imagine now, but yeah.
So instead of building a giant website and warehouses, what did he do? His MVP was super simple.
What was it?
He went to local shoe stores, took pictures of their shoes, put the pictures online on a basic website if someone actually bought a pair.
He'd just go buy them from the store and ship them.
Exactly. He'd buy them at full retail price himself. It was inefficient, didn't scale, but it directly tested the core question. Will people buy shoes online? Minimal effort, maximum learning about the value hypothesis.
That's brilliant. Didn't need fancy tech, just needed to test the core idea.
Precisely. Or think about Dropbox. Drew Houston's problem was different. He believed people needed file sync, even if they didn't know it yet. Explaining it was tough.
Right, it sounds kind of technical or abstract.
So his MVP wasn't even really a product. It was a video. A simple 4-minute screencast showing how files would magically sync.
Just a demo.
Yeah, but a really clever one. He filled it with in-jokes aimed at the dig community, people who'd be early adopters.
Did it work?
Like crazy. The video went viral in that community.
Wow.
Their beta sign-up list exploded, went from like 5,000 to 75,000 people almost overnight.
Wow, all from a video.
All from a video.
Yeah.
That laid the need and generated huge buzz before they'd even finished building the real thing.
Yeah.
Tested the value hypothesis again.
So an MVP doesn't even have to be code. It can be a video or like Zappos, just photos and manual work.
Exactly. Or consider food on the table, fuck up.
Yeah.
They wanted help with meal planning.
Okay.
Before writing any software, the founders literally went to supermarkets, talked to moms, tried to sell subscriptions on the spot.
Seriously, like door to door almost.
Pretty much. And for their first paying customers, they provided a total concierge service, manually creating meal plans, shopping lists, doing everything by hand.
Wow, that sounds like a ton of work.
It was. But it let them learn exactly what people valued, what the real pain points were, before they invested a cent in automating it with software. They only built the tech once they were overwhelmed by demand and knew precisely what to build.
Working backward from the customer need.
Yeah.
Love it. Any others?
One more quick one. Aardvark, the social search engine, they had lots of ideas. Instead of building full versions, they built like 6 quick, cheap prototypes.
Okay.
And they used humans to fake the back end. Wizard of Oz testing, it's called.
So the user thinks they're talking to AI.
But it's really just a person typing the answers. Again, super inefficient. But it let them test the core interaction. Would people ask questions this way before building complex AI?
So across all these examples, the theme is minimum effort to learn the maximum about your biggest risks.
You nailed it.
But wait, what about quality, design? Doesn't an MVP risk looking, well, unprofessional or just plain bad?
Yeah, that's a common worry, and it's a valid tension. People want to do good work.
Right.
But Rees argues you need to redefine quality in this early stage.
Yeah.
If the MVP is so bad people can't even figure out what it does, then yeah, it's too low quality. It fails the test.
Okay.
But the main goal is learning what customers value. Maybe they don't care about pixel-perfect design initially. Maybe they care more about just solving the core problem.
So a clunky MVP might tell you design is important, eventually, but first, you learn if the core idea has legs.
Exactly. If users struggle with the design, but still keep trying to use it because the underlying value is there, that's incredibly valuable learning. It tells you what to fix. It's not about being sloppy. It's about being strategic with your effort to learn faster. Quality still matters, especially if defects actually slow down your learning loop.
Okay, that clarifies things. Now, this focus on learning, it suggests traditional financial metrics might not be the best way to track progress early on, right?
Absolutely spot on. Standard accounting revenue,
Huh.
profit, ROI, they don't tell you much when you're still figuring things out, when everything's uncertain. Projections are often just fantasy.
Yeah, hockey stick graphs that never happen.
Right. So the lean startup introduces something called innovation accounting.
Innovation accounting. Okay, sounds intriguing. How does that work?
It's a different way to measure progress in deep uncertainty. The basic idea is, first, get brutally honest about where you are right now. Establish a clear baseline.
Measure your starting point, what's and all.
Exactly. Then, you use your experiments, your MVPs, your build, measure, learn loops to try and move those baseline numbers closer to the ideal state you need for a sustainable business, the one maybe outlined in your business plan guess.
So you're tracking the improvement driven by your experiments.
Precisely. You're measuring the effectiveness of your learning and adaptation. It helps you avoid what Rees calls the land of the living dead.
The land of the living dead. Sounds ominous.
It's those startups that have some users, some revenue, but not really enough to thrive. They just sort of zombie along.
Because they keep persevering without real validated learning.
Yeah, often fueled by this myth of perseverance. They keep tweaking minor things instead of facing the need for a bigger change. Innovation accounting gives you the data to see if you're actually making progress towards sustainability or just spinning your wheels.
Okay, so how do you set that baseline and track the movement?
Through learning milestones, your first MVP. That gives you your first real data points. Your initial conversion rate, sign-up rate, maybe even early retention or revenue per customer.
Even if the numbers are bad.
Especially if they're bad. That's your starting point. That's the reality you need to improve. And when you decide what to test first, Rees says test the riskiest assumptions first.
Go after the big unknowns right away.
Yes. If you can't figure out how to make the riskiest parts of your plan work, there's no point optimizing the less critical bits. Like, if you need ads to make money, first figure out if you can actually get an audience before you build a fancy ad sales system.
Makes sense. De-risk the core first. So, what kind of metrics fit into this innovation accounting? Are there specific types we should look for?
Yeah, Rees gives us a great framework. The 3 A's of good metrics. They need to be actionable, accessible, and auditable.
Actionable, accessible, auditable. Okay, let's break that down. Actionable.
Actionable means the metric shows clear cause and effect. When you see a number change, you should understand why it changed and what you did or could do to influence it. It guides future actions.
Okay, so not vanity metrics.
Exactly. Vanity metrics are the opposite. They might look good on paper, but don't tell you anything useful.
Like, crap, website hits.
Classic example. Hits go up great. But why? Was it a marketing campaign? A blog post? Bots? Are these engaged users or just flybys? The raw number doesn't tell you what to do next.
So what's better?
He champions cohort analysis, tracking groups of users who start at the same time and seeing how their behavior changes over time.
Ah, so you see if changes you make actually improve things for new users compared to old ones.
Precisely. You see the real impact of your changes. IMVU, for example, tracked cohorts based on download date, then watched logins, chats, upgrades over time for each group. Very actionable.
Okay, actionable makes sense. What about accessible? Just means easy to understand.
Pretty much. Reports should be simple, clear, using tangible units. Think number of people doing something, not abstract ratios if you can avoid it. Everyone on the team should be able to get it quickly.
And easy to find.
Yeah, make the data readily available. Rees suggests the dev team should own the reporting infrastructure, make it part of the product, accessible to everyone internally. Like at IMVU, they had a simple one-page dashboard showing all experiment results.
Nice. Okay, third A, auditable. Why is that important?
Trust. Data needs to be credible. When an experiment fails, especially if it was someone's pet idea, the first instinct can be to blame the data.
The tracking must be broken.
Exactly.
Huh.
So the data collection needs to be reliable, transparent, and trustworthy. Everyone needs to believe the numbers are real. That way the data can actually be used to make hard decisions without endless arguments about its validity.
Actionable, accessible, auditable. Got it. So armed with these kinds of metrics, startups can then face that big decision, pivot, or persevere.
Right. And Rees calls this one of the hardest, most potentially wasteful moments for a startup. Getting it wrong is expensive.
Define pivot again in this context.
It's a structured, controlled course correction. You're testing a new fundamental hypothesis about the product, the strategy, or maybe the engine of growth itself. It's not just tweaking, it's a significant shift.
But it's based on what you've already learned.
Yes, that's key. It's not starting from scratch. It's using your validated learning to change direction strategically. 1 foot rooted in what we've learned, as he says.
Okay, so it's different from just optimizing what you're already doing.
Totally different. Optimization is fine-tuning the current engine, improving conversion rates, making features slicker. A pivot changes the engine or the destination. The overall vision might stay the same, but the strategy to get there changes.
Can you give an example of a pivot?
Sure. There was a company at 2Gov, started by David Benetti. Initially, they focused on user engagement, a sticky engine, get people using it a lot.
Okay.
But the metrics just weren't moving much. After digging into the data, they pivoted. They shifted to a paid growth model, targeting really passionate activists who'd pay for tools to help their cause.
So changing the core hypothesis about who the customer is and how they'll pay.
Exactly. And key metrics like registration, activation, retention all improved dramatically after the pivot.
Interesting. Any other examples?
Wealthfront is another big one. They started out as kind of a social investing platform, follow the experts, copy trades.
Oh, I remember that phase.
Then they made a major pivot to become what they are now, an automated wealth management service, a robo-advisor.
Yeah.
Complete shift in the core product and value proposition.
Wow. Okay. And the danger of not pivoting when you should.
It's that land of the living dead thing again. You keep optimizing, tuning the engine, but you hit diminishing returns.
Like you run dozens of A/B tests on your sign-up button, and the conversion rate barely budges.
Exactly. If you're putting in lots of effort, but the core metrics just aren't improving significantly, it's a huge red flag. It probably means the underlying strategy is flawed, and you're just wasting time, money, and morale by persevering when you should be pivoting.
Are there different kinds of pivots?
Yeah, Rees mentions a few. One common one is the zoom-in pivot.
Zoom in.
That's where one feature, maybe something you thought was minor, turns out to be the only thing users really love. So you pivot to make that single feature the entire product. You zoom in on what's working.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, you mentioned earlier the book connects to lean manufacturing, like Toyota, specifically the idea of small batches. How does that apply here?
Right. Traditional manufacturing, like traditional software development, often worked in huge batches, make thousands of identical parts, or write code for months before testing.
The waterfall method.
Exactly. Toyota, partly out of necessity after the war, pioneered using smaller, more flexible machines that could produce different things quickly in smaller quantities.
Okay, so small batches in manufacturing. How does that translate to startups?
Two big benefits. First, you spot problems way faster. Remember Toyota's Milan cord. Anyone spots a defect, they pull the cord, stop the line, fix it immediately.
Right, don't pass defects downstream.
Same idea with small software releases or feature increments. You find bugs or usability issues much sooner when they're cheaper and easier to fix. You're not waiting until the very end to find a massive flaw.
Okay, faster quality feedback. What's the second benefit?
Flexibility, agility. If you're working in small batches, you can change direction much more easily based on feedback. You haven't invested months building a giant thing that's now headed the wrong way.
Like trying to turn a battleship versus a speedboat.
Perfect analogy. Russies uses Alphabet Energy as an example. They make stuff that turns waste heat into electricity.
Cool tech.
Yeah, but instead of needing giant custom factories, they base their tech on silicon wafers.
Like computer chips.
Exactly, which meant they could use existing, cheap chip-making infrastructure to produce their stuff in small batches.
Those are...
Super clever. And it allowed them to test their initial market hypothesis, selling to big power plants really quickly. Turns out that wasn't the best market, but because they worked in small batches, they could pivot much faster to other markets without a huge sunk cost.
Small batches enable faster learning and pivoting. Got it. Now, the book also talks about engines of growth. What's that about?
The engines of growth are basically the sustainable ways a startup acquires customers over the long haul. Reedes argues that real, lasting growth comes from the actions of your past customers.
How so?
He identifies three main engines: the sticky engine, the viral engine, and the paid engine. And usually, successful startups focus really hard on just one of these at a time.
Okay, one engine at a time. Let's take the sticky engine first.
Sticky is all about retention, keeping the customers you get for a very long time. Think subscription businesses, or maybe companies where network effects are strong, making it hard to leave.
So the key metric is?
Churn rate, how many customers are leaving. For the sticky engine to work, your churn rate has to be really low, ideally close to zero, so your acquisition efforts lead to cumulative growth.
Low churn is key. Okay, what about the viral engine?
Viral growth happens when customers bring in other customers just by using the product. It spreads like, well, a virus.
The classic example is Hotmail adding that signature.
Exactly. Get your free email at Hotmail. Using the product inherently spread it. Or social networks where inviting friends is core to the experience.
And the metric there.
The viral coefficient. On average, how many new customers does each existing customer bring in? If that number K is greater than 1, you can get exponential growth. Even close to 1 is powerful.
Okay, sticky, viral. What's the paid engine?
Paid engine is straightforward. You pay to acquire customers. Through advertising, sales teams, whatever costs money to bring people in.
Okay.
For this to be sustainable, the math has to work. The amount you spend to acquire a customer, the cost per acquisition, CPA, must be less than the total profit you expect to make from that customer over their lifetime, the lifetime value, LTV.
OTV, CPA.
Got it. That positive difference is the fuel. You reinvest the profit from existing customers to acquire more customers, and CPA includes all the costs, ad spend, sales commissions, everything.
Sticky, viral, paid. 3 ways to grow sustainably. And all this, the learning, the metrics, the engines, it's all driving towards product market fit, right?
That's the holy grail, yes. Product market fit. That magic point where the market basically starts pulling the product out of your hands.
How do you know if you have it?
Well, Mark Andreessen famously said, you can always feel when product market fit isn't happening. Things feel hard. Growth is a struggle. Customers aren't sticking around or telling their friends.
Rees has a simpler rule of thumb, doesn't he?
Yeah, he basically says, if you have to ask if you have product market fit, you probably don't.
Huh. Okay, fair enough.
When you have it, the indicators from your chosen engine of growth usually become really clear. Your viral coefficient takes off, or your LTV-CPA ratio looks great and is scaling, or your churn rate plummets and cohorts retain beautifully. The metrics start to sing.
So once you hit product market fit, engine humming, can you finally relax? Put your feet up?
Probably not. Reeves makes the point that even successful engines eventually slow down. Markets change, competitors arrive.
So the cycle continues.
It has to. Established companies need to find new sources of growth, often by incubating new innovations internally, basically running internal startups. This requires becoming an adaptive organization.
Adaptive, meaning able to handle change easily.
Exactly. Able to deal with rapid, unexpected shifts. And Rees offers tools for this too. One is the 5 whys technique.
5 whys for problem solving.
Yeah, for getting to the root cause. When something goes wrong, a bug, a failed launch, a drop in sales, you don't just fix the symptom, you ask why. 5 times.
Like a persistent toddler.
Yeah, but with a purpose. Each why drills down another layer. You mentioned the Toyota example earlier, the machine stopped. Why? Fuse blew? Why? Overload? Why? Bearing seized? Why? Lack of lubrication? Why? Oil pump shaft was worn? Why? No strainer, letting metal filings get in.
So asking why 5 times got them from a blown fuse to needing a simple strainer, the real root cause.
Exactly. It connects fixing things to learning why they broke in the first place. It builds that adaptive muscle.
And for bigger companies trying to innovate, you mentioned internal startups, sandboxes.
Right. To make innovation repeatable, you need a way to shelter these new, risky ventures. Give them scarce but secure resources, independent authority to act fast, and a real personal stake in the outcome for the team involved.
Scarce but secure, meaning not unlimited budget, but they know it won't be pulled randomly.
Exactly. And the innovation sandbox idea is key here.
What's that?
It's a protected space for experimentation. It has clear boundaries. Maybe only certain customer segments or certain types of experiments are allowed initially.
Okay.
It protects the main business from the startup's potential mistakes and protects the startup from the main business's bureaucracy. Crucially, it needs senior management buy-in, usually involves volunteers who want to be there, and focuses on those actionable metrics we talked about. One standard report.
So the sandbox allows rapid iteration and learning, even if some ideas fail.
Yes, it makes it safe to fail and learn quickly. The goal isn't functional excellence right away, it's validated learning, which, Rees admits, can feel less productive initially to people used to just executing defined tasks.
That's a big mindset shift, moving from being busy to learning effectively.
It's huge, and it brings us back to the core purpose of the whole book.
Which is?
Eliminating waste. Specifically, the waste of human effort, creativity, and potential spent building things nobody wants.
He quotes Peter Drucker, right?
Yeah, that great quote. There is surely nothing quite so useless as doing with great efficiency what should not be done at all.
Oof.
Powerful. In today's world, we can build almost anything. The real challenge isn't how to build, it's figuring out what is worth building. That's where the lean startup comes in. Our future prosperity, Rees argues, depends on the quality of our collective imagination and our ability to test those imaginings against reality efficiently.
Wow. Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. This deep dive really shows the lean startup as a scientific method for navigating uncertainty.
Yeah, scientific and adaptive. It's all about prioritizing that validated learning.
Through the build, measure, learn loop.
Using MVPs to test your biggest assumptions quickly.
Using innovation accounting and actionable metrics to track real progress.
And then making informed decisions, pivot, or persevere based on that evidence.
And it's not just for brand new startups. It's a mindset, right? Applicable anywhere innovation is needed.
Absolutely. It's a way of thinking about building anything new.
So maybe for you listening, think about how this applies to your own work. Where could you use validated learning? Where could you run a small experiment?
What are those big leap of faith assumptions you're operating under right now? How could you test one, even in a tiny way?
And maybe a final thought to chew on. If we can build pretty much anything now, how do we make sure we're building the right things? How do we avoid that massive waste of effort Rees talks about?
What's your next small experiment going to be?
Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.